But I wanna talk about firstly Kelsey Plum before we get into like the aces and things. I want to talk about Kelsey Plum because Kelsey Plum, you know, she ruffles some feathers sometimes. Doesn't always mean to, but she does sometimes. In the beginning of the season, before the season started, she was on the boardroom. And she talked about, or I think it was maybe in the middle of the season, but she was having a conversation about like the Aces being called a super team, right? And she mentioned the fact that, well, before they got Candace Parker and before they got Alicia Clark last year, when teams were ranked, the Aces were 5th on the list before they won the championship. And then, of course, obviously won the championship this year, but Candace Parker only played 18 games. And Alicia Clark obviously was 6th woman of the year. But we talked about this before, right? But is it safe to say at this point now that the Aces are a super team now that they've won 2 championships in a row, or is that not the case?
I mean, I have said, I've given my stance on the show. Like, I do consider them a super team just because I respect the level of talent that they have that much. They have 4 star level players, and to me, that warrants having a super team. To me, it's not as much about like them going back to back. That adds to their super team resume. That just adds to their dynasty resume. But to me, when you have multiple stars on your team, it's that simple. You're a super team. Even if they lost, even if the Liberty won, the Aces will be a super team. Are you good over there, bro?
I got a shortage in my extension cord now, just suddenly. So I had to replug that. Yeah, we're good though.
You should have said your Expelliarmus before we started.
I probably should have. Yeah, I probably should have. No, I mean, I agree. We had this conversation a couple weeks ago. I wouldn't. Kelsey Plum makes a great point though. Like in theory, right? When you talk about where the Aces are, like despite the fact that the Aces won a championship last year, like the people who are in the league, players, executives, GMs rank them 5th as far as whether or not they who would be most likely to win the championship last year. I can't really sit here though and hold off on calling them a super team anymore. I know the last time we talked about this, I said that they're not a super team because they the players they have were drafted, and when you have 3 consecutive number 1 overall picks, they should pan out and be who they've become. So that's great. But yeah, they're a super team. I mean, I can't sit here and really deny it much further, but it's also okay. I think the interesting thing is that somehow along the lines of like the changing of culture in basketball on the men's side as well, we've somehow turned super team into like a dirty word. It's a bad thing for your team to be really, really good. Whether it's in the case of the Liberty, where you've just got a bunch of really great players coming together in one place, whether you have a situation like the Aces where you have really great players out of college, drafted number 1 overall, and they've now hit their prime and hit their stride at the same time. Like whether that's the case or not, like being a super team doesn't it's not a dirty word. It shouldn't be treated like it's a dirty word. I think that's the problem really, is that so many of us in the basketball community, not just on the men's or women's side, have turned the word super team into a dirty word as if it ruins basketball. But in all honesty, like I actually like the idea of super teams. I think it makes it that much more interesting when you have some of those teams that aren't super like going up, but like it's like now you really get one of those good old fashioned David and Goliath matchups. Like I think that to me that's more interesting than just a bunch of super great teams just going. Like it's fun, but that dynamic of being an underdog makes basketball better. But
yeah, I mean, the whole thing, like we said before, the reason why super team has a negative connotation as a term is because it really, I don't know when you remember super team really becoming a thing, but when I remember my first instance and reference of hearing like super team was LeBron to Miami.
I was going to say the Heatles would have been the big one. Yeah.
The big one, like super.
And then they tried to like backdate it and talk about like the big 3 Celtics and like some other teams. Like now that this term exists, but
we just whatever the excuse. We didn't have the term. No one thought of it. Like whatever. That was a big 3. They had. I mean, maybe a big 4 if you count Rondo. So like we know they had a big 3. It's just that we just weren't calling it a super team yet. Mm-hmm. To me, and I hold this stance always in that comparison about all the Celtics did it first. The Celtics didn't have arguably the best player in the game go play with another top 5 level player in the game and then recruit the top power foot. It's still not the same. It's still very different dynamics. So let me just put that out there. But that's when I remember super team. And then the KD to the Warriors was like,
super
team on steroids, right? So, but it's about how it's constructed. This is what we talk about. This is where I understand if people want to make that distinction about if it's a super team or not. I can understand that. It's just that I'm looking at just what you have. I don't care about the construction. I get it in terms of like they created a super team. So people, even you had said you felt like the Liberty were the super team between Vegas and you. You considered that just because of how it was constructed. And I guess
again,
I understand that.
Because again, when you go back to like when we first started calling teams super teams, it was LeBron and the Heatles, and they came about because LeBron went to Miami and Chris Bosh went to Miami. Like that is the idea. You think about KD and the Warriors. KD left OKC, went to Golden State. People try to call the Clippers a super team, but they're hurt too much for them to be a super team. Like even that dynamic of it, like you have two players leaving where they were. Like that is the idea to me. So I guess in essence, for me holding the position all season of the Aces not being a super team, it wasn't necessarily to diminish the greatness of the players on the Aces, both individually or collectively. It was my way of saying like our standard for what a super team is has been set. It's been set since 2011, really. This is a super team. When a really great player goes somewhere else and joins other great players. If that's the standard that's set, then that's not what the Aces are. The Aces are a team that just drafted well. And we shouldn't be mad at the Aces for having done what front office are supposed to do, which is draft well and do a good job of developing players. And so because the word super team has become such a dirty word, all season of like, look, if we're talking about super teams, there's only one super team in the league because the Aces just did what any front office would love to do, which is hit on all their picks and put together a good team in doing so.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Liberty and Aces are both qualified super teams. And that's great for the league. Now, the KP quote that to me was most interesting, I want to know your thoughts on what she said about the Liberty. Now, she clarified and she came back and said it was taken out of context, not really what she said. I don't know if you read the quote. I read the quote, and it looked like she kind of said what they said she said about the Liberty, like not really caring about each other, them not being a real team. What did you think about that?
So I understand the sentiment. I think, but again, like so. As an Aces fan, like I get these quotes all the time from KP. Like that, like there's always a quote from KP that is going to ruffle feathers, and it's not always. Sometimes she's intentional, but sometimes she's not. Like she said before game 4, she was like, "Yeah, we've been hurt, we've been arrested." Like referencing Raquana, like that's just who she is. Like she just kind of like she's a straight shooter. So she's a straight shooter. That's who. That quote to me was, I think there is some truth to that. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Liberty don't care about it. I would never say that because, of course, they care about each other. But I think what Kelsey was alluding to is the idea that, like, the Aces, again, going back to the idea of, like, what makes super team a super team, like, Kelsey's been there since, 2017. Asia's been there since 2018. Jackie's been there since 2019. Like, they have grown together. They have gone, like, Asia's been hurt a couple of times during those stretches. Like, they were in the bubble together. And like, so the idea is what she is saying isn't like the Liberty aren't a team. What she's saying is the Aces have gone through a lot together. They've had super high peaks and they've had super low valleys. Like they've been through thick and thin. They went through a stretch when they were, supposed to be one of the best teams in the league, but the coaching just wasn't what it was supposed to be. And so they couldn't get over the hump. Like they went to a point where they were in the finals previously before even winning their first championship in 2022. They were in the finals before and lost because of coaching. So what I took from that wasn't that the Liberty aren't like, they don't like each other. What I took from that is like, this is their first year together. They haven't had nearly as many struggles as we have had together. And a lot of times that adversity is what makes a team a team. Like that adversity of like picking each other up when they're down, like that is what makes a team a team. And so Kelsey was basically saying like, we've had these moments over these last 4 or 5 years where we have all had to kind of have each other's backs and be super vulnerable with each other through the ups and the downs, through being sued and being arrested, coaching changes, injuries, all those things. The Liberty haven't. They've been together for one summer. They haven't had nearly as many ups and downs as the Aces had. So I even when I first heard the quote, I kind of understood what she meant when she explained it. I mean, I understood. I didn't think she was meaning anything ill by it, but there's always someone somewhere that's going to take offense to something. I don't think she meant any harm by it at all, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, again, reading the quote, it did seem like she said what she was trying to say she didn't say about them, like, not caring about each other. From what I read, it seemed like that did come out of her mouth. But I think what she said to clear it up was exactly what you said. She was more so trying to speak to the Aces than the Liberty. She was speaking more to like, we've been through it. They haven't been through it yet. They just haven't been together. And that's just a fact. They haven't been together that long. I did find it kind of interesting that like John Quell had to respond, Stewie had to respond. And like, to me, that is giving the Liberty kind of fuel as a group going forward. I even saw Sabrina's response to it in a quote, basically saying what we're saying. It's like, we understand that this is our first time together. Like we kind of, they even said like, now where I hate where the division happens is where this whole classless and classy conversation started.
Yeah, that's where I started to have a little bit of an issue.
Because, you know, Stewie, while I can respect where she came from in her response, saying like, you know, we're going to stay classy as usual. We're not really going to respond to that. You know, I think that was just her way of just being Stewie, where she's not confrontational. She's not going to fire back or say something. And also, I don't think that was her saying that the Aces aren't classy. But I think people like to make it about that because that was her response. You know, it wasn't her saying, oh, we're classy over here and they're not over there. She's just her way of saying like, you know, I don't have anything to say. I don't think anyone else is going to, you know, the GM had a great response, but that was after KP had kind of cleared it up already. But I do think that's a way for the Liberty to say, because John Quell had a really compelling quote to say like, yo, these women picked me up over the summer. They were here for me. They had my back. Like, so the whole, like, they don't care about each other thing, I think that kind of planted a seed in them to be like, all right, a little extra fuel, a little extra motivation, a little extra awareness to be like, yeah, we are going through this together. Like, we actually, like, no, wait, guess what? We do like each other. We do care about each other. The last thing I'll say about it, and this is big, like in sports and basketball and anything, the Aces, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the contrast between these two teams over the next couple of years. The Aces are like all personality, unapologetic, dancing before, KP and Asia turning up before the game in the warmups. Like, to them, that's what it looks like to enjoy each other's company, to care about each other, to have fun doing this. So like, if you look on the other side and you just see people just warming up as usual, you might think like they're not as connected as we are. And that's fair. Because again, they've been together longer. So it's fair to think that. But no matter how long we're together, no matter how long, even if that team's been together, you can still look down and look at how they interact and how they talk and how they look at each other and how they hold each other accountable. And you can sense like, nah, they're not as connected as we are. And I think that's mainly what she was speaking to.
I agree. And we've got like 3.5 minutes before we bring Diamond on. So I do want to just tap into this super, super quickly. Again, Aces first back-to-back champ since the 01-02 Sparks. Obviously, the third team overall. The Comets won the first 4. Are back-to-back titles enough? Because this conversation has started now. Are back-to-back titles enough to call the Aces a dynasty? Or do they need to win the third first?
I'm a three-peat dynasty person through and through. I need the three-peat. That's always been my experience. It's like when they three-peat, then we talk dynasty.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you think about some of the greatest dynasties, not just in basketball, like in sports, right? The Comets dynasty, they won the first 4. The Lynx dynasty, they won like 4 and 5 years or 4 and 6 years or something like that. You talk about UConn women's basketball dynasty, they won 4 in a row. They won a lot more than 4 in a row, but they won a lot of basketball games together, right? If you take it to the men's side, you're talking about, you know, the Kobe Shaq Lakers, and you're talking about the Warriors, obviously of a more recent memory, the Bulls, you know, the Showtime Lakers, things like that. So 3 is what it takes to be a dynasty. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Aces are a dynasty yet. I'm an Aces fan, and I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the best, one of the best teams ever, because this could all fall apart very quickly. Like this could all, and I'm not saying it will, but it could all fall apart very quickly. Like Becky Hammond kind of mentioned it during the parade last night. Like, it's tough to win 2. It's hard to win 1. Mm-hmm. It's harder to win 2. It's very difficult to win 3.
And like she also said,
it's very difficult to win 3.
She's about to be on Asia's ass, something that she doesn't even understand because she's never they don't know what it means to three-peat.
Yeah.
So as hard as it was to win 1, as hard as it was to win 2, if y'all want to get 3, as hard as that was, if y'all want to tap in, that's why Becky said, I'm on. Guess what? I'm about, like, yeah, we having fun, but guess what? A couple months, we got to start thinking about Nate. Like, you want to win again? You want to do this again? It's going to be that much harder. So, yeah, celebrate now, but that three-peat's going to be a much bigger monster.
I do think there will be, and I don't want to downplay the accomplishment, and I don't want to downplay the rest of the league either, but we've kind of talked about as well. The presence of Candace Parker for a full 40-game season, of course, will make a major difference as far as it'll still be difficult, again, because we're talking about winning 3 championships in a row. That is still a difficult task, but a full-time presence from Candace Parker should make that task slightly easier than what
if she's back. That's a three-peat. With those 18 games, I've never seen a WNBA team, maybe any team, look that good.